Welcome, dear dreamer. Before our story begins, take a deep breath, and let it out slowly. You are safe, you are here, and this time is for you. Find a place of comfort, whether you are lying in your bed, resting your head on a pillow, or curled up in a quiet corner. Feel the weight of your body sink deeper into relaxation. Notice your breath, soft and steady, like waves against the shore. If your eyes grow heavy, let them close. If your mind begins to wander, let it drift, like clouds across a gentle sky. And before we step into history, a small reminder: if you enjoy stories that soothe your heart and calm your thoughts, you can subscribe to Dream Academy. Each night, you'll find more journeys like this, stories that are more than stories, whispers of history, made for dreams. Now, let us wander together to another time, another land, to fields of gold, to rivers that wind like silver ribbons, to the heart of Punjab. There, a tale waits for us, the timeless love story of Heer and Ranjha. A story sung for centuries, a story of devotion, longing, and fate. Punjab, in those days, was a land alive with beauty. The soil itself seemed to hum with fertility, and each season painted the earth in colors that delighted the senses. In spring, mustard flowers stretched across the horizon, their golden blooms swaying in rhythm with the breeze, as if the very fields themselves were singing. In summer, wheat stood tall and proud, shimmering in the light of the sun, turning into endless seas of gold. The Chenab River, gentle yet eternal, flowed through this land like a vein of silver, carrying with it both life and legend. The riverbanks were always alive, children splashing in the shallows, women washing clothes and sharing laughter, fishermen casting nets and singing age-old songs that echoed across the water. And in the evenings, as the crimson glow of sunset dipped into violet dusk, the villages would gather. People sat in circles, telling stories that had been passed down for centuries. Some spoke of saints and mystics, others of love and longing, while the younger ones played games, their laughter rising like sparks into the star-filled sky. It was a land not just of people, but of poetry. Every field, every gust of wind, every ripple of water seemed to carry meaning. Punjab's spirit was one of both abundance and yearning, life blooming fully, and yet always aware of the fragility of time. And in the heart of one such village, lived Heer. Heer was no ordinary woman. The villagers often said that if the moon itself were to descend upon the earth and take human form, it would be Heer. Her beauty was not only in her face, though her features were delicate and radiant, the curve of her eyes like the soft stroke of a calligrapher's brush, her smile luminous, and her hair flowing like midnight silk. More than her outward form, it was her presence that lingered with anyone who met her. Her laughter was said to ring like temple bells, clear and joyous, cutting through the stillness of the fields. When she walked, it was as if the earth paused to notice her, graceful, steady, free. Heer belonged to a respected family, her father a man of status and honor. The village admired their wealth, their strong cattle, their bountiful harvests. But Heer was more than her family's pride, she was the village's light. She was known not for arrogance, but for her compassion, her way of listening to even the humblest of voices with genuine care. And yet, within Heer lived something untamed. Her spirit was free, like the river that refused to be contained, like the wind that carried secrets from faraway lands. Though her family spoke of duty, of marriage, of alliances, Heer often looked to the horizon with longing. She dreamed of something greater than what was expected of her, of a love that was not arranged or decided, but discovered, as natural as breathing. And then came Ranjha. He was the youngest of 4 brothers, and like many youngest sons, often misunderstood. His elder brothers were practical men, concerned with land, wealth, and daily toil. They looked at Ranjha and saw someone different, dreamy, contemplative, a man whose hands were better suited to a flute than a plow. He loved music, poetry, the quiet moments of reflection by riversides. To his brothers, this was weakness. To Ranjha, it was life itself. One day, after quarrels and misunderstandings grew unbearable, Ranjha left his home behind. He set out with little more than his flute and his unshakable spirit, seeking a world that might understand him, His wanderings took him across villages, rivers, and fields, until at last fate led him to Heer's land. In this village, he found work tending cattle. It suited him well. Alone with the animals in wide open fields, he could play his flute without judgment, letting his soul pour out through music. To him, the flute was not merely an instrument, it was a voice, one that could say everything words failed to capture: loneliness, hope, longing, and dreams. Fate is curious, it works quietly, yet firmly. It hides in coincidences, in passing moments that suddenly alter the course of everything. One day, Heer walked to the fields. She often visited, for the land was her solace. The tall wheat whispered to her, the river called her name, and the wind carried her thoughts farther than her eyes could see. That day, the air was especially gentle, the sky especially clear. And then she heard it. The sound of a flute. It was unlike anything she had ever heard. This was not a simple tune played to pass time, it was a song woven from the threads of longing itself. The notes rose and fell like waves upon the river, sometimes soft and tender, sometimes aching with sorrow, sometimes stretching into eternity. It seemed less like music and more like a voice calling directly to the heart. Heer stopped in her tracks. Her breath caught. The melody wrapped around her like silk, delicate yet unbreakable. She stood still, listening, as though even the act of moving might shatter the enchantment. Her eyes searched, and then she saw him. There was Ranjha, seated beneath a tree, the cattle grazing quietly around him. His eyes were closed, his hands moving with practiced grace over the flute. He seemed lost in the music, unaware that the world was watching. But the world was indeed watching, through Heer's gaze. In that instant, the earth itself seemed to pause. The rustling of leaves, the hum of bees, the distant calls of villagers, all softened, as if the universe had bent its ear to listen with her. Ranjha opened his eyes, and their gazes met. For a moment, it was as though time itself was suspended. He saw her, radiant, glowing like the sun over golden fields. She saw him, his music still lingering in the air, his eyes deep and searching. One gaze was filled with song, the other with wonder. Heer approached slowly, her footsteps barely disturbing the grass. She wanted to speak, but words seemed clumsy compared to what the flute had just said. Ranjha, too, was silent, his heart racing as if it had been caught mid-song. Finally, Heer asked softly, "What song is this?" Ranjha smiled faintly. "It is not a song I learned. It is a song that came to me, as though carried by the wind. Perhaps it was waiting for someone to hear it." Heer's lips curved into a smile, her heart beating in ways it never had before. Then today, it found its listener. And just like that, a thread invisible to all but them bound their hearts together. It was fragile yet unbreakable, tender yet eternal. From that day on, Heer found herself drawn to the fields more often. She would walk among the wheat, pretending to gather flowers or watch the cattle, but always her eyes searched for Ranjha. And he, though shy at first, began to anticipate her presence. He played the flute not just for himself anymore, but for her. His melodies grew richer, warmer, more alive, as though her presence breathed life into his music. They spoke, sometimes lightly, sometimes deeply. She told him of her childhood dreams, of wanting to be more than just her family's daughter. He told her of his wandering, of the feeling of never belonging, and how music had been his only home. Together, they laughed at small things, the playful antics of the cattle, the way the wind seemed to tug at his turban, the stubbornness of the goats. But beneath the laughter was something more, a recognition, a knowing. Each saw in the other what they had been missing. Heer saw in Ranjha a freedom, a soul unchained by duty. Ranjha saw in Heer a light, a presence that gave his wandering heart a place to rest. The villagers began to notice. They whispered of Heer spending too much time in the fields, of the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of the cattle tender. Some saw it as innocent, others as dangerous. For Heer was no ordinary village girl, she was heir to wealth, to respect, to alliances. And Ranjha was but a wanderer, a dreamer with a flute. But love, once it begins, does not ask for permission. It grows quietly, like a seed beneath the soil, unseen until it bursts forth unstoppable. And so, beneath the wide sky of Punjab, between golden fields and silver rivers, began the story of Heer and Ranjha, a story not just of two lovers, but of two worlds colliding. Time in Punjab flowed differently then, measured not by clocks, but by the rising of the sun, the soft shadows of dusk, and the endless rhythm of the seasons. For Heer and Ranjha, time became something else entirely. Days stretched like golden wheat fields, wide and endless, yet every stolen moment together passed too quickly, as though fate were jealous of their joy. They found one another wherever they could. Sometimes it was beneath the sprawling shade of an old banyan tree, its roots like arms enfolding them in secrecy. Sometimes it was near the Chenab, its waters whispering their own eternal love songs. And sometimes, in the quiet stillness of starlit nights, they met among the fields where fireflies glowed like scattered jewels upon the earth. Their love was never loud or careless, it bloomed in whispers, in tender glances, in laughter hushed so that no one else might hear. When Ranjha lifted his flute to his lips, the world itself seemed to fall silent. His music was not just a melody, it was a confession, a secret poem woven into the air. Heer listened as though her heart itself was being played like an instrument, every note striking a chord deep within her. Sometimes she would close her eyes, letting the music carry her into a dream where duty and family faded, and only love remained. Other times, she would look at Ranjha, her gaze soft but steady, as though memorizing every detail of his face, the curve of his smile, the way his hair caught the fading light, the earnest longing in his eyes. They spoke, too, though words often seemed unnecessary. Ranjha told her of his journey, of leaving behind a home where he felt unseen and misunderstood. He told her of nights spent under lonely skies, of searching for meaning, and of how his search had ended when he found her. To Heer, he confessed that the world finally made sense when he looked into her eyes. And Heer, in return, shared her world with him. The weight of expectations, the watchful eyes of her family, the narrow path laid out for her since birth. She spoke of longing, of a life beyond the walls of tradition, a life where she could choose, where her laughter was not bound by duty, and where love was not something to be hidden in the shadows. When she spoke of these dreams, her voice trembled between hope and fear. But Ranjha listened as though every word was sacred, and in his gaze she saw not judgment but a reflection of the freedom she craved. Theirs was a bond both fragile and unbreakable, fragile because it lived in secrecy, unbreakable because it was written not in words or customs but in the very language of the heart. Yet love, no matter how carefully guarded, has a way of spilling into the world. The villagers began to notice. They saw the brightness in Heer's eyes, the way her smile lingered as though it held a secret. They heard Ranjha's flute echo across the fields, its melodies too beautiful, too aching, to be just music. And whispers began to stir, gentle at first, then growing with each passing day. "Have you seen Heer?" some would say. "She glows as though touched by the moon itself." And Ranjha, others added, his songs carry something more than notes, something dangerous, perhaps. Villages thrive on stories, and soon Heer and Ranjha became one. Their meetings, though unseen, were imagined in countless ways by those who spoke of them. Children smiled when they heard the flute, while elders frowned, sensing that love, if left unchecked, could unravel the careful threads of order. Still, Heer and Ranjha did not stop. Love has its own courage, born not of defiance but of necessity. How could they deny what was as natural as the flowing of the Chenab, as inevitable as the blossoming of spring? They lived in moments. A shared glance in the marketplace, where Heer walked with her companions but her eyes found only him. A brief touch of hands when she passed him a jug of water, each pretending it meant nothing. A laugh shared under the moonlight, knowing the world around them would never understand. Every meeting was a treasure, every secret memory a jewel they carried within their hearts. And as time moved like a river, their love deepened, becoming something larger than themselves. They were no longer just Heer and Ranjha, they were the very embodiment of yearning, of love that dared to exist beyond boundaries, of the universal ache to be truly seen and truly loved. But fate is rarely kind to such love. Even as their hearts grew closer, shadows gathered at the edges of their world. Whispers turned into suspicions, suspicions into warnings. Elders muttered of duty and honor, of families and pride. And though Heer and Ranjha held on to their dream, the storm was already gathering on the horizon. For love, when it dares to bloom against the weight of tradition, often finds itself tested. And Heer and Ranjha's love, as radiant as it was about to face the trials that would make their story eternal. Heer's family had always been proud, guardians of tradition and honor in their village. Their household stood tall among the others, with its high mud walls, courtyards alive with chatter, and its legacy of respect. To them, Heer was not just a daughter. She was their pride, their jewel, the reflection of their social standing. Every gesture she made, every step she took, was bound by expectations far older than her laughter and far stricter than her dreams. When whispers reached them, that Heer, their moon-faced daughter, was seen lingering too long in the fields, her eyes following the wanderer who played a flute as though it were enchanted, the family's silence was heavy. Silence in villages often means more than words. And in that silence, decisions began to form like storm clouds gathering unseen behind the horizon. To Heer's family, Ranjha was no equal. He had no land, no wealth, no cattle of his own. He was a wanderer, someone who carried his home on his back and his dreams in the hollow of his flute. Tradition did not forgive such things. Love, they thought, was a luxury for stories and songs, not for daughters whose marriages secured alliances and honor. And so, one night, when Ranjha returned from tending cattle, his flute still warm with the music of Heer's smile, he was summoned. Words were sharp, pride unbending. They told him to leave, to never set foot again in their village, to silence the melody that had dared cross boundaries. No pleading was entertained. No explanation was sought. Ranjha was an outsider, and now he was cast out once more. He did not argue. How could he? Love had made him bold before, but before the stern faces of Heer's kin, he stood silent. His heart thundered, yet he bowed his head. To resist would be to shame Heer further, to cause her pain. And so, without a farewell, without a chance to speak her name, Ranjha was forced to walk away. His flute lay in his hands, and for the first time, it did not sing. It wept. Ranjha wandered. Across fields of wheat that shimmered under the punishing sun. Through dusty paths where his feet cracked and bled. By rivers that once reflected Heer's laughter but now seemed endless mirrors of his loneliness. The land was wide, yet every corner carried her face. He played, yes, because the heart cannot contain itself. But the melodies that once fluttered like sparrows now dragged like wounded birds. The villagers who heard him no longer smiled with wonder, they sighed, sensing sorrow even if they did not know the story. His flute had become his confession, his prayer, his companion. Each note carried Heer's name, her memory, her laughter. He sought solace in shrines, bowing before saints and fakirs who listened to his story without judgment. Some told him to surrender, that worldly love is fleeting and that only divine love endures. But Ranjha, with his broken heart, answered only with silence. To him, Heer was not a distraction from truth, she was the truth. It is said that one night, near Yuk Sharif, he dreamt of her. In the dream, she stood by the chinab, her dupatta fluttering like a banner of hope. She called his name, and the sound was not sorrowful but filled with light. He awoke with tears, yes, but also with resolve. For dreams, to those who believe, are not illusions but messages. And so he walked on. Meanwhile, Heer's family began weaving other plans. Suitors came, alliances were considered. Each proposal was a dagger in her chest. Her lips spoke polite words, her body obeyed, but her soul screamed in silence. To her, every mention of marriage felt like a betrayal, not because she opposed the ritual, but because her heart had already chosen. Her love for Ranjha was not infatuation. It was not the fleeting spark of youth. It was devotion, carved deep into her being, inseparable from her breath itself. And so, even in separation, she belonged only to him. At wells and fields, women hummed songs about star-crossed lovers, and Heer's eyes often glistened. The songs were not merely entertainment, they were veiled mirrors of her own life. Sometimes, she sang along softly, her voice trembling, her heart pouring into every note. And those who heard her knew, though they pretended not to, that this was no ordinary sadness. Thus, the story of Heer and Ranjha entered its darkest chapter, not in death, not in betrayal, but in silence and distance. Two souls bound by love, forced apart by pride, carried each other like wounds that refused to heal. And the land remembered. The Chenab flowed, carrying with it echoes of a flute and the shadow of a girl who once stood at its banks. The fields ripened, golden, whispering with the winds that once carried laughter now replaced by sighs. The stars remained watchful, distant yet constant, as though keeping vigil over two hearts lost in the labyrinth of fate. Their separation became a story in itself. A story that mothers told to their daughters as warnings. A story that poets carried in their verses. A story that travelers repeated by firelight, making strangers weep for lovers they had never met. For love, when torn apart, grows larger than life, it becomes legend. And so, Heer and Ranjha's sorrowful distance was not merely their own. It was shared by a land that thrives on stories, by a people who know that love is both a blessing and a trial. Years passed. Seasons turned over one another like pages in an ancient book, yet the love between Heer and Ranjha remained unbroken, carried in the whispers of the wind and the songs of wandering minstrels. Ranjha, though driven away, did not surrender to despair. He wandered the vastness of Punjab and beyond, barefoot on blistering sands, hungry beneath the stars, his flute his only companion. But sorrow has a way of reshaping a soul. In his journey, Ranjha sought refuge with mystics and saints. He bowed at shrines, prayed at mosques, listened to the wisdom of wandering fakirs. Some say he even joined a Sufi order, where he was taught that true love, ishq, is not only for mortals, but a path to the divine. Yet, even as he tasted that higher truth, one name remained carved into his heart, Heer. His every prayer carried her memory. His every step was an echo of the day he left her behind. When he finally returned, Ranjha was no longer just a broken wanderer. He was a man transformed by longing and devotion, a figure of resilience. He carried within him the stillness of deserts, the patience of rivers, the fire of a heart that had endured exile. But fate, so often cruel to lovers, was waiting. Heer, radiant still but wearied by years of sorrow, had been promised to another. Her family's pride remained unyielding. To them, Ranjha was still only a wanderer, a man with no land or wealth. Their vision could not see the treasure of devotion he carried. Their honor demanded her obedience, not her happiness. Whispers spread that Heer and Ranjha planned to flee. They dreamed of crossing the Chenab under starlight, of disappearing into lands where no one knew their names, where duty and chains could no longer bind them. It was a dream fragile as morning mist, yet it was all they had. But in every great love story, betrayal has a way of creeping in. A relative, envious of their bond, bitter at the defiance they represented, laced Heer's food with poison. To her family, it was a lesson in obedience. To the betrayer, it was a victory of pride. Heer ate, never suspecting. The poison worked quietly, cruelly. Her laughter faltered, her strength waned. Her lips, once curved in secret smiles, grew pale. She lay upon her bed as the world blurred around her. It was then that Ranjha arrived. Perhaps it was fate, perhaps it was the echo of her heart calling him, but he came to her side in those final moments. Heer's eyes, dimmed yet searching, found his. Even as life slipped away, she reached for him, her fingers trembling, her lips whispering his name. Ranjha wept. The flute that had once sung of joy now lay silent. He held her close, refusing to let go, his tears falling like rain upon her fading face. Some say she smiled in that final breath, knowing he was there. Some say her spirit lingered only long enough to see him once more. When her chest grew still, when her hand fell limp, Ranjha felt the world collapse. And in that unbearable moment, he chose to follow her. Legends say he took the same poisoned food, unable to live without her. Others say his grief itself was the poison, that his heart shattered, and no man could live with such a wound. Side by side, Heer and Ranjha left this world, but not each other. Their bodies may have been claimed by earth, but their love became eternal. Punjab itself wept. Villagers sang their story as though it were their own loss. Poets wove verses that carried through centuries. Their names became inseparable, a single breath, Heer Ranjha, a song for all who believed in love greater than fear, deeper than tradition, stronger than death. And so, their tragedy was not just an ending. It was a beginning, of legend, of remembrance, of the eternal truth that love, though fragile in life, can outlive time itself. And so, dear listener, the tale of Heer and Ranjha drifts into silence, like the final note of a flute carried away on the night air. This is not a story of victory, nor of happily ever after. It is a story of devotion, of two souls who dared to love beyond the walls of pride and duty. Their lives ended in sorrow, but their love became a beacon, teaching us that love is not measured in possession, but in sacrifice. Not in how long it lasts, but in how deeply it transforms us. As you rest now, imagine the fields of Punjab under a silver moon. The Chenab flows gently, its waters soft with the reflection of starlight. A warm breeze carries the faintest echo of music, the kind only a lover's heart could create. Perhaps you hear Ranjha's flute, perhaps you see Heer's smile, both eternal, both untouched by time. Imagine them together, not bound by family or betrayal, not by poison or sorrow, but free. Walking side by side along riverbanks, their laughter mixing with the sound of flowing water. Free, at last, in a world beyond duty, in dreams where nothing can part them. As you breathe slowly, let this image settle in your mind. The night is gentle, the stars are kind, and the story of Heer and Ranjha wraps around you like a soft shawl. Perhaps tonight, as sleep draws near, you will walk among them. Perhaps you will sit beneath a tree by the Chenab, listening as Ranjha plays his flute for Heer. Perhaps you will feel the peace of a love that no force could truly destroy. Rest now. Let the story carry you. Let the weight of the day fall away. Love, sorrow, beauty, all flow together like a river, guiding you deeper into dreams. For in dreams, as in stories, nothing is lost. Love remains. Music remains. And you, too, are part of this eternal song.